Hey, everybody. So this week we are in conversation number 51, almost 52 weeks worth, which would be a year. So we are here in kind of the dog days of summer now. It's in August as we are recording. And in terms of what's going on in the world, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And we will talk about something that's going on, like kind of like near to my world later on in the paywall, embryo selection. A startup that a lot of my friends are actually involved in. But first, I want to talk about the tariffs and the geopolitical angle um, that is working with the tariffs. So, when I think of geopolitics, as a child of the 80s and 90s, I'm thinking like disarmament summits and stuff like that. And then there's the whole economics aspect. Like obviously, this is an artificial separation. Geopolitics and economics and globalization are really connected, but it's really obvious. With the Trump administration right now, and in terms of just negotiating these bilateral commitments instead of a big, global framework of like, whatever, like the G20, whatever. Like it's like Trump White House, Trump administration is doing one on ones, and sometimes it seems to work, and sometimes it doesn't seem to work, and there's upsides and downsides. Um, for me, I mean, I've been pretty frustrated by this actually the whole time that we've been talking about tariffs because and it's come up in private conversation with friends in terms of one of my big frustrations is I had assumed that we understood as America that uh, a big geopolitical task of the next generation of the next 25 years, 2025 to 2050, is to restrain and frankly encircle the China. Just develop good relations with Vietnam, develop good relations with India, have some sort of rapprochement with Russia. That'll be hard. There's all sorts of economic and frankly somewhat historical ties between China and Russia that are a little difficult to tease apart. And so I thought that and like we have Taiwan. Obama tried to pivot to Asia, and I think Bridge Colby, who is in the Trump administration now, has also wanted to pivot to Asia to deal with the geopolitical ramifications of that. I mean, Asia is, it is now, I think, like the biggest, economic center in the world. There's a reason it's important. Its population hasn't started declining yet. There's some fertility rate issues, but that'll be a while. But like this week, for example, as we're recording, this is not the only case, but it's an extensive case. America, Trump, the administration has really antagonized India, which that in itself is not a big deal. But my understanding is the Vietnamese are not pro-China anymore, but they don't really see America as a reliable bulwark in the same way. So they're hedging their bets. And obviously, our relationship with Russia is, the whole Ukraine issue has really soured it. But still, um, you know, there was some hope that maybe the Trump administration could get that back on a better path. That doesn't seem like that's happening. I feel like America right now is like, what in the Bible in Genesis, what to describe Ishmael, like, his hand against every man, this sort of attitude, which, we are the most powerful nation in the history of the world, but this is not the 1990s. And, we have some issues, and I don't really, candidly, I like a lot of the things Trump is doing on the domestic sphere. Okay. I'm just like, I have a hard time my MAGA, like, trust the plan friends have a hard time convincing me about the international stuff because Donald J. Trump will not be president for life. He will be gone. And I think, people have memories of the way America treats them much more than we remember the way we treat them, you know? And so I think that I'm worried about like the seeds of distrust that this is sowing. And, for like the India relationship, for example, the Trump administration is making nicey nicey with Pakistan, which I'm not actually necessarily opposed to. Like, if we want to do it, we should do it. But I think
I mean, that's
everyone
a
knows that that
historical.
is just to send a. It's what?
I was just, I mean, that's the historical U.S. position has been friendly with
Yeah,
Pakistan, and some of that had to do with Cold War stuff, which no longer applies. Probably, it makes more sense now for us to switch and be, more allied with India because it's a bigger economy, it's a
Much
bigger
bigger.
river, and it's more of a counterpoint to China.
Well, I mean,
Um,
and Pakistan is to a great extent, a Chinese vassal state
right,
as
China,
well,
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
a little weird. Yeah. But
So I don't
anyway,
know.
I mean, that's just that's how I'm feeling. I don't, like, comment too much on geopolitics. I am not like, a resistance lib. I am not reflexively anti-Trump. Uh, I just have a really hard time thinking that this is going to work out for us in the long term, and I think part of the issue is when I talk to my friends in the administration who are, like, or who are much more MAGA aligned, like, these are, like, serious people, not, just, like, MAGA chuds that are just, like, doing talking points. They don't they just think America is just gonna be super powerful forever, and, like, China doesn't really matter, and they're gonna demographically collapse and all this stuff, and I'm just like, "Maybe, but honestly, I don't think so." So, anyway, that's just my take, but, I mean, what do you how do you feel?
I'm not. I haven't been following what's been going on terribly closely in terms of the tariffs and whatever. It. I- I'm not a big tariff guy, as we discussed before. I'm basically a unreconstructed free trader. I
Yeah,
recognize that there are some complications when it comes to China and national security type stuff. But as you point out, that can also weigh against tariffing, other countries that we want to be allies against China. It seems, I guess, I have been using just kind of as a shorthand stock market reaction in the thoughts that, hey, look, I mean, we know from earlier when Trump tariffed the world, the market went into kind of a tailspin, and then when he suspended everything, it went fine. And so, whatever if I hear about some deal is very complicated, if the market doesn't react or seems to think that it's fine or whatever, then probably it's fine. Is just kind of my layman's assessment of it. So it's from that perspective, things seem to be going okay. Which is not to say that it would be better that we wouldn't have been better off to just not do it all to begin
yeah,
with. Um, it does seem like we're cutting some deals with different people. Um, in terms of alienating people, uh, I think that's an important point. I do think you have to be willing to alienate other countries sometimes, but only when it's necessary, and sometimes, like some of the stuff with Canada, 51st state, all of that, it just didn't really like it seemed kind of pointless. And now I
well, it
guess,
didn't go anywhere. We don't
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it.
it weirdly, um, it weirdly makes sense on the theory that Trump wanted the liberals to run Canada, because he was like, the liberals were on track to get wiped out in the elections, and then he started talking a bunch of stuff about how he was going to annex Canada, and then the liberals came back and won the election, and then since then it's just kind of a drop. So I don't know. That doesn't seem like that's hugely positive, but overall it's hard for me to say. I can say, like, as a general matter, I think probably uh we should be trying to cultivate India as an ally against China. I mean, basically, there are very few countries that I don't think we should be cultivating
Yeah,
as I think we should try to cultivate Russia as an ally against China. You know what I mean? I mean, so except with the exception of like, okay, North Korea, Iran probably doesn't make any sense, and there are some countries that just don't matter um, geopolitically at all, right? I won't. I'll be
yeah,
nice and not mention some, but okay, yeah. But like everybody else, if it's this is one problem I think with the whole tariff thing is one of the justifications that I heard is that we are the one of the for the purpose of this of the tariffs is that we're trying to make people choose, do you want access to the American economy or do you want access to the Chinese economy? Now, I don't think the tariffs are actually set up that way. I also think that is a tactic that probably would have worked if we had done it 20 years ago, maybe, but now it's probably kind of too late for that. I think if we did do that, there might be a growing number of countries that would actually say, actually, China is probably more important to us going forward as a market than the United States because you know they got a billion people there, and you know they're not up in our business, and so on and so forth. So, um, but I don't know. I mean, it's complicated, and so my hope is that whatever happens, I don't think we're fundamentally going to alter the course of like international trade, you know, or even the right, like for good or for ill, you know. I don't like there will be some changes, but I don't think we're going to shift back to a heavily manufacturing economy. I don't think we're going to. I think China is going to continue to rise, you know, unless there's some. The tariffs are not going to do it, you know. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way, right?
Yeah. Just like we talked about the tariffs. I mean, again, like honestly, there's probably like very little. I mean, actually, no. There's very little daylight between me and you. I mean, we don't discuss tariffs like in our. We have disagreements about certain things. I don't think like we're not vociferous about them, but we know what we disagree about. We don't talk about the tariffs because we don't disagree about them at all. You
Right,
know,
right.
like we're both, you know, like the old like libertarian, fusion. What I'm saying? That's kind of where we both came out of.
Mhm.
Just as Gen X people, a younger Gen X. But what I want to like focus on like, in this conversation though is like, um, so my friend Zina Brabua, who has been on my podcast, she's a realist, realpolitik.
Right.
And when you're talking about interests and incentives, and people do selfish things all the time. And you can like break everything down into kind of like a cynical, selfish calculation. Uh, and I think there's a phase in many youth's lives where they're like, yeah, like no one really has any beliefs; they only have interests. And maybe you're attracted to Marxism, or maybe you're interested, if you're like more libertarian or right wing, you're interested in objectivism. And I don't want to like caricature objectivists as not having ethics, but I think what I'm getting at is this idea of like self interest driving everything. Um, and as I've gotten older and like I've read more history and I've just like thought about it, I mean, what was the self-interest of Christians in 3rd century Rome during the plague of Cyprian, when they were helping pagans? There's so much of history you cannot explain through simple rational calculation and self-interest. And I'm not saying that this can't be understood analytically, but I think the realist framework is frankly like in the long term, it doesn't explain a lot. I mean, in the long term, some of these idealistic, unrealistic ways of thinking actually explain much more of human action and human behavior. And I think that's because we do have ideals and we do have beliefs and they do matter. And I'm bringing that up because America has done a lot of bad things in the world in terms of foreign policy, for example. And like, I know it, you know it, etc. We're not always the good guy in every single instance.
Right.
Uh, but I do think that one of the key advantages that America does have in terms of a soft power is we aspire to be a better nation. I mean, this is sounding like national greatness, like George W. Bush BS, and I don't mean it to sound like that. But I think a lot of us do believe that. And do hope for that. And even those of us who were open to saying we're isolationists, which I have been open to in my life, like I'm not the super most interventionist guy, still believe that America is a good model for other people. And I think one of the problems that I'm having with this current tariff slash geopolitical regime is Trump's attitude is very transactional. He's like, what is it for me? You know? And we've always kind of been like that, more or less. But the reality is we had these other values, which, people accuse us of being hypocrites all the time. And we are hypocrites. But you know what the good thing about being a hypocrite is? It means that you have some values you're aspiring, you're promoting that are actually good. nobody ever accuses China of being a hypocrite. You know, everybody knows that the Chinese government's, activities in Africa are totally transactional, which means that, Africans have like, they don't really have any goodwill to the Chinese. It's just, what have you done for me now? And that actually has caused problems for China in terms of like, countries have turned against them really quickly. Well, it's because like there was no like deep well of goodwill. And I do worry that America right now, in terms of its behavior, of like even with like Europe and our European allies, and I'm getting a little too much of a vibe, in like, in MAGA world of like, freedom fries, vibe, where it's like, "Screw the Europeans," and like, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, and I'm just like, look, at the end of the day, they are imperfect in many different ways,
Yeah.
but they are the closest friends, culturally, civilizationally, the United States of America has. Arguably, you could say the same about Canada, which, like, we've kinda been like, and so it just I just think that, like, we can't be just another, rational actor nation in the world. We are the most powerful nation, yeah, but we also have an aspirational model, of who we are, and I think that that's being kind of, you know, uh eroded by the current administration's behavior, candidly. And I'm just not, we're gonna live a long time, knock on wood,
Yeah.
And so, I was expecting, people to have a certain view of America, and if we're just like, oh, just like that powerful nation, like China, you know, it's not like the Chinese are like, we come here to bring the vision of like, the Chinese party to Congo or Brazil.
Right.
They're coming for resources. They're coming for geopolitical value. It's like,
Right.
what have you shown me now? Anyway, I've been going on. I don't know what you think about that.
So I think there is some truth to that. I do think, um, at the same time, to some extent, I think one of the reasons why some people, other countries and parts of the world prefer China to the United States is precisely that they don't have a moral vision that they're seeking to impose on everybody, right? So, I mean, one thing that the United States, particularly recently, is, I mean, we do view ourselves, as the shining city on the hill or whatever, and so that means that we kind of think, or at least in the recent iterations, part of our mission is to spread the American way of life to all corners of the globe, which includes things like, promoting LBGT rights in Ghana, or female empowerment in Saudi Arabia or whatever, right? All sorts of stuff that conflicts with local customs, institutions, traditions, etc. And I think that I think has been alienating to a lot of people, and also a little annoying because there is, while I there could be some sanctimony, involved with the United States claiming to be a moral beacon, right? I'm not, obviously you're right that the fact that we hold ourselves out to a higher standard is important, but it's also the case that, we we'll talk about, the rules based international order or whatnot, and then we also just violate we violate it when we want and expect to have like impunity and so on and so forth. So I you know
Yeah,
I think that there's an opportunity for a more realist, Trumpian, almost transactional perspective. I think there are a lot of places in the world that would not be offended by that. They're willing to work with that. They're appreciative of that. And so it's really just a matter of, it's art of the deal. The art of the deal does not involve spitting in other people's eye for no reason, right? Or being, hyper aggressive, right? Almost pointlessly. So that I would say is a bigger issue. Um,
yeah,
because I mean, Trump is never going to be it's never going to be a George W. Bush or an Obama or a JFK type figure in terms of being an inspiration for American global leadership. But he could be a Nixon. Nixon was also very realpolitik, very transactional. When he talked about the superiority of the Western or the American way of life as opposed to communism, the stress was all on the stress was on material prosperity and other things like that, not moral superiority, right?
Yeah.
So and Nixon obviously has a very debated um, foreign policy record or whatnot, but Nixon, Kissinger, all that, like, this very smart people, and they did achieve things like uh,
Yeah.
opening of China, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think there's it's an open space, right? That
Yeah.
could be that could be done positively, but you have to actually do it, right? You have to actually accomplish it.
So, we'll close on this, I guess, maybe unless you have some more to say. The way I think about it sometimes is when Trump said, I think it was in 2016, it was during his first run, I think, he's like, we do bad things too. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like, he's saying the truth. He's telling the truth. But we have done, Mazda is like the famous example, but there's other ones. Okay. But now, like 8 years down the line, it reminds me of back in like, say like 2005 or 2008, where a lot of people, and media criticism were like, it's just great. Like, you should just like express your opinions and be partisan because you always are. Like, you're being fake and all that stuff. And I remember agreeing with that because I'm like, yeah, like just be who you are. I don't care. That way I'll know what your real views are. But that actually didn't work out. People are just moral clarity is just obnoxious, and they're even though they are always biased, it was still better when they tried not to be. Okay, and so I will say I feel a little bit like that, where it's like, oh, I got what I wanted in terms of, yeah, like, America, we do a lot of, we're selfish and we're realistic and we do all this stuff abroad, and like, don't be on your high horse. But now I'm just like, like trying to be on the high horse and failing was I'm actually kind of okay with that. Like now I'm just like, okay, like I don't want America to be just another nation. I don't think we are still. But I think like if you perform the role long enough, you will become that. And so I guess as just another nation, one of the things that's going on in our state of Texas is, an issue with the Democrats leaving the state because of a redistricting effort. And, my take is like, okay, this is just like some sort of performative, whatever. It never works. But like, give us some background. Like, you've been here in the state, like, well, I mean, pretty much forever. You had a sojourn outside the state, but you're a native Texan, and this has happened multiple times in your life now.
Yes, I think this is, depending on how you want to count it, this is either the fifth or sixth time that Democrat legislators have fled the state in order to try to prevent a quorum in the state legislature related to some. They basically uh, have all been election related stuff. Several of them have been specifically redistricting. Back 20 years ago, more, I think it was maybe 2003. Um, the state decided to do mid. Um, normally states do redistricting every 10 years, right? But in 2003, what what you had was actually a switch over from Democrat control to Republican control. One thing that people don't quite realize is they think of states like Texas, other places, as being Republican strongholds, and they certainly have been, especially at the presidential level. But in a lot of cases, actually, legislative control came comparatively late. So even into the 90s, uh, the Democrats still controlled at least one chamber in the Texas legislature. So they had done a redistricting that the Republicans at the time felt was kind of skewed in their favor, and so they decided to do mid-decade redistricting, which you can do. Normally, you don't. They don't do it because, like, why would you? You already did it. But they did, and the Democrats. I think at that time they went to either Oklahoma or New Mexico. I forget which.
I thought it was
Because
Oklahoma.
yeah, so you need a certain so didn't have a majority, but you need it's either 2/3 or 60% or something like that of members present to be a quorum. So the tactic is most of the members just don't show up, and then you leave one guy there who can just object or call for a quorum, and then they can't conduct any business, right? So that's the theory, and the rules provide that if they okay, yes, you can do that, but the solution is that the governor orders the state police to go arrest the members and forcibly return them to the chamber, you know? So for that reason, the members can't just not show up the legislature. They have to actually get outside of the jurisdiction of uh, of the state police. So they've gone to New Mexico. I think they went to DC. I think they might have gone to California once. I don't know where they are now, but so yeah, they've done this a couple of times. It basically never works in that you know. Uh, I mean, from like a game theory point of view, it's the Republicans can just wait them out, because they can be here, in their homes, and the Democrats have to be outside the state. They have to come back at some point. Um, Especially in Texas, we don't have a full time legislature, so a lot of these people have other jobs. You know, so what has typically happened in the past is there's a big stink about it for a while, and then eventually they come back and whatever the thing is passes, right? So that's probably what will happen. The other thing that I do find interesting about this, and I don't entirely know how to square these two things in my mind, is I do find it interesting that the Democrats only ever seem to do this for election related issues, right? Like I think they've done it a
But yeah,
couple.
redistricting. Yeah, yeah, redistricting. Not policies that are non-electoral.
I think that they did it one time that was over like a voting. I don't know if it wasn't voter ID, but it was something like that, where it wasn't redistricting per se, but it was still election. So they don't do it like if the state of Texas, wants to restrict abortion or LGBT rights or do stuff about immigration or guns or whatever that they say is really bad. They never try to break quorum for that, right? But when when in theory, like jobs are on the line for Democratic office holders, that's the one time where they're like, okay, we're gonna go to the mat for it, even though it still doesn't work. But so I do find that kind of striking as well. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, as, not a political person, I always think these sorts of like legislative tricks, like kind of like procedural tricks. Um, I mean, do they ever actually work? I mean, it just seems like grandstanding. You're showing your constituents or whoever is funding you, I guess, I don't know, that you're trying to do something, and yet everyone knows it's not going to work. What is, I don't, like I said, I'm not a super political person. So for me, it's like, why would you do this? Like, it's just not going to work. Aren't you there for your stuff to happen? And, but I guess, like, just sort of like symbolic. And you know what? Like, Republicans would not do like, would do like similar things, I think, in some ways with, I don't know, like some of the debt ceiling stuff. I remember like Ted Cruz, who's our, well, he's still the junior senator, isn't he?
yes, Cornyn
Yeah, but
is
he was around since the Tea Party, and he would just be like, we could just like will them to like prevent the debt ceiling from being. And I was like, okay, the numbers just didn't work out. Like, what do you? you're very smart. So I don't understand what's going on here, but obviously politicians do this all the time, and their supporters know that it's not going to work too. So it's just like you just kind of go through this thing,
Yeah.
and you perform it, and then that's something, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of politics does have this kind of feature that it is, um, performative, and people are doing things that they know are not going to work just to show that they tried to do what they could, right, to people. That happens a lot as well. So sometimes I guess you're required to like really go through the extra efforts of making it look real, even if you can't
Oh,
ultimately do
uh,
anything.
and I do want to say just to give some context. So in Texas, the legislature, the Senate has been, I guess, in Republican hands since 90s. Well, I mean, since 1997. And the House has been in Republican hands since looks like 2001, right?
Right.
Uh, or is it two? Yeah, yeah. Wait, is it two? No, no, no. 2001. No, 2000 and it was 2003. The 2003 session.
Yes.
So in
That's why.
2001, yeah,
Right. So two.
2001, it was still Democratic majority. Yes.
Yes,
Uh,
and that's
77
why.
to 77 to 71, and then it flipped to, uh, 62 to 88. 88 as Republicans. So, yeah, substantial majority. And then actually, like, it's kinda going back. I mean, it's never come close, but, the peak was in 2011, 101 to 49, and now it's 88 to 62. I don't know. I know what that's
Right.
about. The Senate is lopsided about 20 to 11, like 20 to 19 to 12, that sort of thing. So, we know Texas is structurally the whole blue Texas thing, did not happen. Someone online, as they say, was saying, Texas really needs to nominate, to ever win. I mean, we haven't had a statewide person since I think like the what was it? There's some like Texas like land commissioner type thing. I think that was the last statewide Democrat or something.
I think it
We
might have been 1994. I think was the last.
Well, that's Ann Richards, right?
No, Ann Richards won in 1990, and George Bush defeated her in 1994.
George W.
George W. Bush, yes. But the lieutenant governor at that time, Bullock, was a
Oh,
Democrat, and I
he was
think
still a Democrat. What did because
correct.
didn't he change or no? He did.
No, he remained a Democrat. He worked closely with Bush, so they had a friendly relationship or whatever. But he never switched, and then I
You're
he
right. You're
died.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. So actually, like that year, there was a bunch of them. Bullock won, Morales, I guess, Attorney General, John Sharp, Comptroller, Gary Moore, Land Commissioner, and Martha Whitehood, Treasurer. And then no Democrat has won a Texas statewide race since.
right. So it's
So
been
that was
30
just
years,
yeah,
and um, I would say it's also, uh, you know, there are some like in Florida, for example, the Republicans have held the governorship for about as long as in Texas, but they've mostly been squeaker elections.
yeah.
The last one was not, but most of them. I mean, most of the time, the Republicans would often they would win by like 1 point or something. And in
Well, I
Texas,
mean, like DeSantis in '98 almost lost to the I think pretty
correct,
much
yeah,
socialist,
18, yeah, and
the bisexual socialist.
yes, and Rick Scott, his victories were very thin margins in both defense and or whatever. But anyway, but in Texas, I don't think any of them have really been close. I think that the closest would maybe have been like when Ted Cruz ran against Beto, and even that, I still think Cruz won by 4 points, something like that,
Yeah,
right?
but it made him sweat a little bit.
Yes,
You
right,
know,
right.
that was the only time that because like there hasn't been a governor race or anything. They just they
Not even typically what happens is that the Democrats will pick one of the statewide races, either Senate or governor, or may occasionally maybe lieutenant governor or something, and they'll try and like put all their focus in on that, but it still doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, so do you think so Florida has been Florida went from purple state. I mean, actually it was like I mean, Obama like won it pretty handily. Even I think even against Romney. So but now it's Trump has pretty much I mean, I did because Biden didn't get it, right? I don't
Correct.
recall.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, I don't. Yeah. No. 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 Trump won in 2020. You mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Trump won Florida easily in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like basically Florida is now a red state.
It's
Yeah, so he
Yeah. Florida is like the anti-Virginia
yeah.
in that it's trended heavily red in the same way that Virginia has been trending blue.
So, I mean, I guess the issue here is, Texas has, been a red state for a generation now, like our pretty much our adult lives. And there's been like these attempts to like, oh, is it going purple and all this stuff? But I mean, I'm looking right now. Like, let me just yeah. So, like Texas, I'm actually using AI, but, compared to, like, the national, Republican vote and the Texas vote, and it's just like, in the '90s, it tilted Republican, peaked actually during George W. Bush. Oh, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right?
Right.
And then, like, so it's like so Texas is, like, +10. Again, was +10 between, from 2000 to 2012, stylized factors, Texas was about +10 compared to the national vote for Republicans, okay? Um, Under Trump, it's been closer to, like, +5 and +6. So Trump has something happened. I think the fact that Romney did so well is telling you there's a certain type of Republican, uh, you know, suburban Houston moderate women, whatever. There's a whole thing there. Some of them have gone blue, like some of them,
Yeah.
right?
And I will also say, Trump's message, uh, it was geared, I would say, towards, maybe the Midwest, Rust Belt states, stuff like that. Um, in Texas, uh, I would say, like, at least traditionally, opinions on on trade have been much more positive because I do think we've gotten a lot of benefit out of NAFTA, and I mean, we have a lot of manufacturing here, but we have also had the oil and gas industry, which has provided a lot of well-paying blue collar jobs for people. So I don't think his message resonated quite as much. Um, we also have had, you know, a large Hispanic population, which is has been more GOP friendly than in other places, and that they might have been turned off a little bit at the beginning. Now I think the Texas results in 2024 kind of substantiate this a little bit. There has been a little sea change. People have come around to Trump a little bit more. So I don't know if Texas actually we're, we might be back up
Yeah,
to
yeah.
+10 or maybe +8 or whatever.
Well, so in 2024 it was plus 6.3.
Okay,
Uh,
well, there you go.
2020 it was plus 5.2. In
Yeah,
2016 it was plus 6.1. So there's been a slight warming. I think some of those like suburban blah 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 whatever. But comparing Florida and Texas, I feel like some people are saying Texas might be a bigger opportunity. And one thing that just before we go on to the last topic, I have thought about this. Um, there used to be, moderate Republicans in the Northeast. Susan Collins is the last. I think the Vermont governor is still a Republican, but very moderate to liberal. And and like I think John Sununu, New Hampshire, like is still holding the
yes.
fort down. But and he's on the moderate side. Although he would be like considered a conservative in the 1980s. Actually, he's not that moderate actually, but whatever. My point here is, in the South, there used to be conservative Democrats, conservative moderate Democrats, and in California, it's actually like pretty polarized, and so the Republicans are just not a statewide force. Aside from Arnold Schwarzenegger, they haven't been able to compete since Pete Wilson, and Pete Wilson actually was back then a relative moderate, aside from immigration. The point here is. Texas, if you want the Democrats to compete, they need to be more moderate. But is everything just too nationalized? New England is an exceptional case because that is actually the historic stronghold during like the downtime of the 20th century of the Republican Party. Uh, and it has like this really strong institutional support. But even there, MAGA candidates were nominated last time for the governorship and they just got walloped.
Yeah.
So it looks like they might, New England itself, when Susan Collins retires, or if she loses, New England itself might shift over. I mean, those moderate Republicans in places like Connecticut, Nancy Johnson, who lost, and then Chris Shays, like they've never been replaced. Like Connecticut is now a Democratic state, so it seems like that's just a historical legacy. Like, what do you think explains? Is it just nationalization? Like we just can't regionally reposition anymore?
Well, I don't think it has to be that way because as you pointed out, it hasn't been that way in the Northeast for Republicans. It's certainly not to the same extent as the rest of the country. And then if you just look in Louisiana,
Joe Bell.
they had a Democrat governor,
Yeah.
up to a couple years ago. Now, he was pro-life. I think he was pro-Second Amendment. He basically, I do think that a Democrat could win, but they would have to kind of be willing to junk a lot of the hot button cultural and social identity marker issues in the same way that a more moderate Republicans, they're all in the Northeast, they're all pro-choice and so on and so forth. Um, so if the Democrats wanted in Texas to have a real shot, um, probably what I mean, there's a senator here in Texas, Democrat, Chuy Hinojosa, who's like just a very moderate Hispanic. There are a few that like if they weren't if they weren't Hispanic, maybe they would probably be Republicans. Who knows? But so that would be their best shot. I think would be to nominate someone like that. But I don't think they're willing to do that. Certainly, that would probably cut them off from a lot of national money, which they feel like they need. And the Democrat Party in Texas is sort of like the flip side of the Republican Party in California, where you know, uh, through a combination of unwillingness to, uh, you know, tack to the center and just a history of being beaten down, it's just not in their bloodstream to do that. So none of the, if you look at who they've put up, um, uh, to try to win these races, um, Wendy Davis was a senator here. She was best known as
Abortion Barbie.
Fortune Barbie, yeah. And Beto, he would say things like "Hell yeah, I want to take your guns away," or stuff like that, right? So, and then the Castro brothers, they were smart enough to never actually run, but people always wanted them to run. They're big, like, I think one of them actually ran for the Democratic nominee for president and was talking about like we need abortions for trans women because that's reproductive justice.
Well, also, yeah. So I think this was Julio Julian Castro. He had like two like things that were like one. I think like people in hindsight, he did bring up Biden's age. That deep sixed him,
Right.
during a debate. But the other thing is he was the one who pushed everybody for like
Yes,
the
yes,
border stuff, and so he screwed Kamala and other people, long term.
yeah. So I don't even know who they're going to run this year. I mean, uh, the action seems to be in the Senate race because Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, is challenging John Cornyn
Mm.
um, for the U.S. Senate, and Paxton will probably win. Paxton has got a lot of baggage. was impeached by the Texas House, not convicted. He spent most of his time as Attorney General under indictment for one thing or another. His wife has just announced that she's filing for divorce. It's known that he had an affair or whatever. Um, uh, he probably, but he's like really popular with the base, so there's a good chance that he will beat Cornyn for uh in the not for
The primary, yeah, the primary.
yeah. So in theory, you would think, okay, well, this is a weakness the Democrats could seize on this, but frankly, I don't even know that they're running any like who are they going to run against him? It's not clear that they even have a candidate that they think is strong, let alone one that could actually beat him.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the math is like really straightforward, and yet they refuse to believe. I guess in terms of math, like segue it a little bit. Like let's go to so embryo selection. So yeah, paywall so that people can hear the evil stuff. Um, so basically, what happened is it was last week. My friend Alex Young, who is a geneticist at UCLA, very so Alex talked about he's had cancer actually over the last like 3 years, colon cancer, or like 2 years, I think he diagnosed. But anyway, but he was writing Nature papers while he was on chemo. So it's been like a rough going, but he's still very productive. He has a high H index. He's a really great scientist, and he has been working as an advisor and helping company called Herasite, which is Hera for the goddess Hera, and the site. So something related to birth. Honestly, name's not great, uh, but we need to go there. Um, and so he's been working with Herasite for a while. And Herasite also, my friend Johnny Anomaly works there. He does sales. Honestly, like I know multiple people that work there personally before they work there as well, and it's part of this embryo selection industry, which my other podcast, Unsupervised Learning, had some embryo selection ads, I guess, from Orchid. Orchid focuses on like basically like recessive diseases and stuff like that. It's based out of San Francisco, run by Noor Siddiqui. There's another company, Genomic Prediction, which does similar things. Parasite. Um, I mean, basically, Parasite claims that it has like a better predictor, especially in polygenic traits. So, type 2 diabetes is a polygenic trait. Autism is a polygenic trait. That just means that there's traits, that there's selection on like multiple things. They also have an IQ calculator. So when you have two parents and they have offspring, you have an expected value and you have a variance around that. And they claim with like, if you have 3 eggs, if you have 10 eggs, like, what is the expected gain that you can get? And so the issue here is there's noise around any outcome due to recombination and genetic segregation. So the genome basically rescrambles itself every single time it produces a sperm and an egg, and those come together. And that's why you see variation among siblings, even though, the basic genetic material is the same. It's rearranged in different ways. And so that means some siblings are tall, some siblings are short. They have different genetic potentialities, you could say. And so among a set of embryos, what Parasite claims to do and what Orchid and genomic prediction to some extent do as well, is just look at the genetic dispositions of the embryos, and then it will select the embryo. It will select the embryo that has the highest value for what you want, and then implant through in vitro fertilization. And so that's their value proposition. There's multiple things going on here. There's the selection for a polygenic trait,
Yeah.
uh, the whole idea of heritability of polygenic traits, and the IVF. And what was interesting to me, I will say, is the reaction from Twitter, the woke type scientists. Like some of the woke people did say something, but really, it was pretty muted. A few geneticists that are like skeptical of these sorts of things did say something, but honestly, it was pretty muted. It was very, very much a sharp contrast to what happened in the spring of 2021 with Orchid. And Orchid is focused on diseases, not like IQ or anything like that.
Right.
And Orchid got a lot of crap. And like there was like several weeks of a 2-minute hate on Noor Siddiqui, the co-founder or the founder of Orchid, from online left-wing scientists, and that just did not happen with Parasite. Even though Parasite is pushing it much further, and the people associated with Parasite, like some of them, and Sasha Gusev, a scientist who does comment on these things, pointed out a lot of them do have associations with far right or pro eugenicist or whatever. Like Johnny Anomaly, uh, Dr. Johnny Anomaly, wrote a book. Was it like Building Better People? So with a Greek
I read
statue
an
on that.
article called like "In Defense of Eugenics" or something like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just like okay, and like the fact that nothing is happening on the left is interesting. Like, it really shows you how like the woke hegemony has diminished. In contrast, there